Okay, back to the Norton. Just a little epilogue on those carburetors. Here's a little before and after picture of the bores in those manifolds. You know, it was quite an improvement on the right hand side, as you can see. So anyway, that only took me about 5 minutes too. So anyway, I'm going to clean up the left one there and just put the carburetors on these and then put them in a plastic bag and save them for when it's reassembly time. There, I'm getting quite a little collection of odds and ends in that old tote there with things that need to be, you know, cleaned up, polished, painted, whatever. Meanwhile, the back end of the bike is pretty much naked right now, except for a couple of things. Mainly the swing arm and the engine cradle, the transmission cradle there, and that I wanted to show you this right here. This is what happens to these old bushings in here after they've been in there and, well, sitting in there for what, 40, 50 years, I guess. There goes the furnace on again. So you know it's not warm outdoors if you hear that running in the background. Anyway, let's pry the rubber off the other side and see if that falls apart like this one did. So let's go over here. And I'll just stick the screwdriver in the end of that. Now those ones are still in one piece. But looking at that white crusty stuff in there, I'd say that they're not long to be in one piece. Anyway, let me just try that screwdriver and have a real good look at that. Yeah, you can see that. They're not real pretty. There's a bunch of corrosion and stuff under there. So anyway, I'm glad I'm going to be changing them out. Let's have a look at the actual rubbers. The actual rubbers, well, there's a little bit of there where you can see it's not concentric anymore, but it's not as bad as it could be. But those, like I said, those spacer shims are definitely beyond shot. So anyway, the last thing I got to do is get that out of there for now, and it's about 20 after 3. Take a little break here, go have a cup of tea maybe, and see what the boss is doing. Well, we got this assembly up on the bench right now to have a look at it, and this little tiny little bolt is the only thing that holds the end caps in place on these swing arms. These swing arms are supposed to be oiled, by the way, not greased, and I did find grease in here, and I'll tell you a little story on the red Commando over there. I put a grease nipple on here years ago, which was a big mistake on my part, and I went to grease that bearing up, and the problem is these are supposed to have oil in them. I think it's W140, really thick stuff like you put in a Model A transmission or something like that. But anyway, the only thing that holds the end caps on this is that little skinny thing that resembles a spoke. In fact, I just measured that up to the spokes on the front wheel on my Triumph, and they're the same size. So anyway, that little long spokish looking thing is what holds the end caps on there. So if you put a grease fitting on here and you try to grease that, there's a real good chance you're going to break that skinny little spoke right off, because the pressure from the grease will just break it, and you'll have to take your bike apart and fix it like I did. Anyway, I learned a lesson from that. So anyway, look at that. There we go. That wasn't tight at all, but that is the cap that goes on the end. There's an O-ring seal here. There's one on the other side under here that rides against the what would you call that? The engine cradle, the engine plates, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, I'm just going to set that there for now. I'm going to try to turn this over and hold the phone at the same time. I don't know if I'll be successful. Anyway, anyway, there's the plate on the other side. You can see the little hole in it where the spoke comes out. Anyway, I'm going to pull that off of there. The actual pin that holds your swing arm in place, it's about an inch diameter, give or take a little bit. I haven't measured it, but it's about that big, so it's a pretty substantial piece of metal, and it goes right through this tube which holds the engine plates here, and there's a bolt right there that holds it in. There are some mods you can make to these if that pin happens to start to get loose in this tube. If that happens, it's kind of like a clamp that goes right on here, and it clamps that tube in against the pin and prevents any movement. That I've actually got that mod done on my red Norton over there as well. But anyway, let me finish getting these apart, and I'll show you what's inside of there. There now, after you get it cleaned up a little bit, this is what you're going to see when you get the swing arm off of that, off the engine plates there. Anyway, here's the pin, the swing arm pin. I said that goes through that large hole, the tube, right there in the engine plates. And that little tiny bolt goes through a hole right there. Oops. Through a hole right there. And that's what keeps that pin in there. And anyway, yeah, that's all there is to it. The swing arm, as far as that goes, it's got these are good bushings. I mean, I'm not changing these. They're in excellent shape, just like brand new. So there's no need to change them out, but you can see there's a large O-ring here that would seal up against this face of the engine plates, and then there's a smaller O-ring right there. I think I might be able to get that one out. There we go. On the end of the bushing, which is kept in place by those end plates there, and that's supposed to keep the oil from running out of there. And let's see now, I'll just show you where there it is. There's little holes in that swing arm pin as well. That would allow the oil to actually flow into those bushings and keep them lubricated. That's a kind of a neat idea. There are some suppliers out there right now who are supplying some really nice looking needle bearing kits for these things, and I was seriously tempted to get one for this bike, but seeing as this is in such good condition, there's not really any need of me, spending $250 or $300 for something I don't need. Like I say, I'm retired, so I'm not rolling in money anymore. Not that I ever was, but in any case, that's the swing arm and the engine mount assembly. Anyway, that all has to, of course, be cleaned up. Here's another argument for paint over powder coating on these, other than it just being cheaper for me, because like I say, I have the equipment to paint. I can paint this if I want to. But as I mentioned before, powder coat is a real nice, tough, nice looking coating. But the trouble with it here, you have to grind it off here because of the way this is made. It's a really snug fit between the swing arm mounts and the face of that engine plate. So, if you do powder coat it, you're probably going to have to grind it off there so that you can get the swing arm back onto the engine plate. Anyway, just something to think about. Okay, there we are, all stripped down to the bare bones. So anyway, I have a really good friend who lives about an hour's drive from here, and he's extremely good with powder coating. He doesn't do it full time anymore, but he will still do it for good buddies of his and that sort of thing. So anyway, he's going to powder coat the frame and the swing arm for me. The rest of the stuff on this bike that's black will be painted black. So anyway, I'll have a good tough coating. Of course, I still have to weld in these holes that some wise person drilled in that tail section there. So I'll do that, of course. And of course, the whole frame, I'm going to clean the old grease and grime off of that before I give it to him. So I don't like. I know it's got to be sandblasted before it's powder coated, but even though, I still don't want to give somebody a greasy, grimy old thing like that to work with. Speaking of greasy, grimy, there's a couple of other things I had noticed before that I had not mentioned before, but I noticed that this particular wheel doesn't have the rubber plugs in that hub plate to remove in order for you to get the bolts out to hold the sprocket and brake drum on the other side. Well, when I got the wheel off the bike, I suddenly realized that I've got a later model hub here. So that's fine with me. It's got the rubber buffers in there to give a little bit of shock absorber effect on the drivetrain, which the earlier Commandos didn't have. So I'm definitely using that. It might not be the proper fitting for the bike, but hey, it's part of the bike's history. I can live with that, and it's an improvement over the earlier type anyway. And another thing I noticed, probably a month ago, I never brought it up, but now that these two wheels are sitting side by side here on the garage floor, that rear rim is definitely Borani. It says Borani on the side of it and everything else, so that's fine. But I got looking at the front rim one day, and it does not say Borani on it. It says Dunlop. So one's Dunlop, one's Borani. Hey, they look exactly the same. They're both aluminum, both got that same shape to them. So I don't care if they don't have the same name on, because they'll work just fine, and they're part of the bike's history, so they'll stay with it. Anyway, as I was mentioning, that's all set to go. So anyway, I stayed up too late last night. I think I might go in and have a little stretch out on the couch, and then later on tonight I'm going over to a friend of mine's house, and we're going to work on his B44. He wants to drive that next year, so he's going to start working on that, get it ready for the spring. So anyway, that's it for this little video. If you liked it, you can click like, you can share if you want to, or subscribe. That'd be great. Thanks for watching. I'll keep you posted.